Good evening to you on this Thursday. I'm Eitan Wallace, and welcome to Impeachment Wrap. Where does America stand? Our web-only live show that wraps up everything you need to know about today's impeachment trial. And as we move on now, today marks the third day of the Senate impeachment trial of President Donald Trump. Chief Justice John Roberts gavelled in the proceedings, followed by a brief but pointed prayer by the Senate chaplain, retired Rear Admiral Barry Black.
Lord, help them remember that listening is often more than hearing. It can be an empathetic attentiveness that builds bridges and unites.
Following the Pledge of Allegiance, Sergeant-at-Arms Michael Stanger reminded senators of their duty during the proceedings. Senate Leader Mitch McConnell outlined the schedule for the day and handed off to the House managers for their third day of presenting their case. Before getting started in earnest, lead House Manager Adam Schiff of Burbank lightened the mood with a remark about the, quote, captive audience.
I'm not sure the Chief Justice is fully aware of just how rare it is, how extraordinary it is for the House members to be able to command the attention of senators sitting silently for hours, or even for minutes for that matter. Of course, it doesn't hurt that the morning starts out every day with a sergeant-at-arms warning you that if you don't, you will be imprisoned.
Before we get into more of this trial's details, let's take a look back at the events that led up to this point. Now, this entire impeachment process stems from a July phone call between President Trump and the President of Ukraine. The President of America, President Trump, was accused of withholding military aid to Ukraine in exchange for investigations of the president's political rivals. And as we move on, those accusations started a long, complicated impeachment process back in November. First, the proceedings went to the House Intelligence Committee, where witnesses testified about the accusations leveled against the president. Each party then wrote up a report about their findings based on that testimony. Now, the reports were then sent to the House Judiciary Committee, where members of that committee reviewed the report, called witnesses, and ultimately decided to write up articles of impeachment. Now, remember, articles of impeachment are considered legislation. The articles then went to the House of Representatives for a vote whether or not to impeach the president, and on December 18th of last year, in a vote of 230 to 197, the House voted to impeach President Donald J. Trump on the charge of abuse of power, and in a vote of 229 to 198 on the charge of obstruction of Congress. The process is now in the Senate, where a jury trial is taking place. Chief Justice John Roberts is the presiding judge, and senators make up the jury. At least 67 senators will need to vote in favor of removing the president from office, and given that the Senate is comprised of 53 Republicans and 45 Democrats, it could be a difficult task to remove the president from office. Even so, the House impeachment managers continue to make their case for the president's removal. Representative Schiff said the plan for today's session was to lay out the evidence they believe supports their first articles of impeachment, abuse of power. Now, Camilla Bernal has the very latest from Washington.
Today's schedule and arguments very similar to what we saw yesterday, but with an emphasis on the abuse of power. And once again, we'll see the managers pushing for those witnesses and documents. As House Democrats enter day 2 of their opening arguments on the Senate floor,
the Senate will now hear you.
The debate over whether President Trump's impeachment trial will include witness testimony continued off the floor. Some Republicans finding the arguments of the House Democrats repetitive.
It seemed yesterday was like Groundhog's Day because we heard what we had heard the day before, and I'm expecting more of the same today.
It's just repeating. I'll be interested to see how the president's attorneys respond to this.
Democrats trying to use that as a point to persuade them to join their call.
If my Republican colleagues are interested in some new evidence on top of the very substantial House record, there's a very simple answer. Vote with Democrats to call relevant witnesses and documents.
Wednesday, the House Democrats offered a detailed chronology with an intense focus on the July 25th phone call between President Trump and Ukraine's President Zelensky. Today, they're digging deeper into the charge of abuse of power.
The articles and the evidence conclusively establish that President Trump has placed his own personal political interests first.
The president's defense team will likely begin their arguments on Saturday.
We're going to begin our robust case when the Senate says it's time to start.
And a vote on whether to subpoena more witnesses or documents would come after the defense has concluded their opening arguments and senators' questions.
And there is an effort in the works to have a morning-only, a quick Saturday session. All senators would have to be on board for this to happen. But of course, so many of them want to go home and get some rest. And Ford in particular want to get back to that campaign trail. Reporting in Washington, I'm Camila Bernal. Back to you.
Camila, thanks so much. Now, we've told you about how incumbent Congressman Kevin McCarthy and TJ Cox feel about the impeachment process. But what about their 2020 challengers? Well, we reported here first. Congressman TJ Cox voted in favor of impeachment, while Bakersfield Congressman and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy opposed it, calling the process unfair to the president. So tonight, McCarthy's Democratic opponent Kim Mangan of Quartz Hill, seen here in a previous report, is weighing in. She is in favor of impeachment and said this about McCarthy's role in the process. Quote, once again, Kevin McCarthy has placed personal gain and loyalty to the president above the interests of his constituents. As a veteran, I know how to serve the interests of others and fight to protect our basic freedoms. It is unfortunate, that Kevin McCarthy has turned a blind eye to the president's misconduct and continues to ignore the concerns of the people he was elected to represent. And in the race for the 21st congressional district, David Valadao is blasting his opponent. Now, the former three-term Republican congressman from Hanford tells me he opposes impeachment. He said this, quote, this rhetoric and the constant gridlock is not productive. Cox has chosen to be divisive and follow Nancy Pelosi and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez in the Washington partisan bickering that people are sick and tired of. Congress and the president should come together to achieve actual results to address serious issues impacting the American people. Now, we reached out to Congressman Cox and McCarthy for a response. Cox's campaign got back to us this evening, saying Valadao's claims are not true, adding Valadao during his tenure in Congress voted with President Trump 99% of the time, a figure Valadao disputes. Now, McCarthy's campaign responded to Mangan's claims. In a message, McCarthy said the impeachment is disgraceful, adding he will always prioritize the needs of the district over what he calls partisan gimmicks like impeachment. Now, we have posted the full statement on our website, kget.com. And we should tell you today marks 40 days until primary election day, March 3rd, and 285 days until general election day. That's November 3rd, 2020. Well, with all that, back on Capitol Hill, House managers have 16 more hours to make their case in the trial before President Trump's counsel takes over the proceedings. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Impeachment Wrap. Where does America stand? We'll be back same time tomorrow with more impeachment details. For all of us at Circle 17, I'm Eitan Wallace, and have a wonderful evening. Good night.